Hello, hello, hello. Peace to the gods. Peace to the goddesses. How y'all feel out there? Hope y'all feeling good. Tonight, we would like to embark on an endeavor of scholarship. We would like to know who are the first people that they got to encounter when they got here. Peace to the gods. All right. So we're going to get into some educational purposes only, you know, and we're going to analyze and be analytical. So hopefully this will help. Ooh, yeah, this will help some, be fun for others. It was something that was we didn't ask you to do this. Come on, yeah. But you know how I like to read. I like to read and then analyze. You know, we're not just going to take anything at face value. We're going to participate in the process. Just a little context. When the Spanish came, right? The Spanish were the first people, quote unquote, here in the Americas. We're going to play along like we believe that story. You know, you could tag your favorite teacher and ask them why ain't they teaching this, but that would just be rubbing it in. It's okay. It's okay. So the Soto was the first person that they met. He supposedly did a voyage from Florida, South Florida, all the way to the Mississippi. He never crossed the Mississippi, so they say, but we're going to find out and see if it makes any sense for us and if it does any good for us. The book that we are reading from is actually called, because I want you guys to know the source so you guys could look and read it and dig into it as much as you like. It's called The History of Alabama and incidentally of Georgia and Mississippi from the earliest period, written by Albert James Pickett. Yes, sir. From 1850, 52, I think it was. I have to check the dates, but based upon my memory, it's from 1852. All right. Chapter 1, The History of Alabama. Okay. DeSoto in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. Let us begin. The first discovery of Alabama was by Hernando de Soto, a native of Spain and the son of Squire Zerce of Bajados. When a youth, he went to Peru, enlisted under Pizarro, and with no property but his sword, won distinguished military reputation. Returning to his native country and making an imposing appearance at court, he was made governor of Cuba in Adelantado, Florida, which is like alderman. He was the alderman of Florida, the governor of Cuba, and the alderman of Florida. In the unknown regions of the latter, he resolved to embark his vast wealth in a splendid expedition designed to conquer a people whom he believed to possess more gold than he had yet beheld in South America. Young men of the best blood in Spain and Portugal sold their houses and their vineyards and flocked to the standard. Soon he was surrounded by an army of 600 chosen men. Now that's his army, y'all. He had an army of 600 chosen men, and he's about to come to America. Okay. Soon he was surrounded by an army of 600 chosen men, 1538 with whom, I guess, um, hmm, forget the typos, 1538 with whom he put to sea over the bar of San Lucar. Arriving at Cuba, he consumed a year in arranging the affairs of his government and in preparation for his great enterprise before him. At the end of that period, he left his wife, Donna Isabel de Bordelia, and the lieutenant governor in charge of the island and sailed for the coast of Florida with a fleet of 9 vessels, 5 large ships, together with caravels and brigantines. A prosperous voyage soon enabled De Soto to pitch his camp upon the shores of Tampa Bay in Florida with an army now increased to 1,000 men. Okay, so when he landed on the shores of Tampa Bay, he now increased his army to 1,000 men. So he added 400 since when he left Spain. Sending out detachments to capture Indians from whom he expected to learn something of the country. He found them skillful with a bow and too wily to be easily taken. Wait a minute, these are some slave catchers. These are slave enslavers. Did you just say that they couldn't catch the Indians? Let me read that again. Sending out his detachments to capture Indians from whom he expected to learn something of the country, he found them skillful with the bow and too wily to be easily taken. In one of these sallies, the soldiers under Baltazar de Galgos charged upon a small number of Indians. At that moment, a voice cried out, "I am Christian! I am a Christian! Slay me not!" Instantly, Alvaro Nieto, a stout trooper, drew back his lance and behind lifting the unknown man up behind him, pranced off to join his comrades. Did y'all want to pause there? Let's read that again. So they use the word sallies, Sallies. That's another word for volleys when you're shooting arrows back at each other. Because again, we like to believe that these guys have muskets, but they don't. They have crossbows. So when they say sallies, they're firing back and forth crossbows. They're going to tell you what type of weapons they have, but they're mostly crossbows. So in one of these sallies, the soldier under Baltazar de Galdos charged upon a small number of Indians. At that moment, a voice cried out, "I am a Christian! I am a Christian! Slay me not!" So now they thought they were going up on some Indians, and one of those Indians looked like a Christian. He didn't look like a white person, didn't say he was a white person. He said he was a Christian. They didn't know he was a European. They thought he was an Indian. Instantly, Alvaro Nieto, a stout trooper, drew back his lance and lifting the unknown man up behind him, pranced off to join the comrades. Pelcelio de Nervez had attempted to overrun this country with a large expedition, but after his disastrous wanderings, he reached Appalachia without finding any gold, and from thence went to the site of the present St. Mark's, where his famished troops embarked for Cuba in rude and hastily constructed boats which were soon swallowed by the waves. Jean Ortez, the person taken prisoner, and who now, in all respects, resembled a savage, was a native of the town of Seville in Spain. When a youth, he came to this coast with some others in search of Narvaez, and was captured by the Indians, who were about to burn him to death. When he was fortunately saved through the entreaties of the beautiful daughter of Ucida, the chief. Sounds like Pocahontas to me, huh? In the earlier periods of this slavery, he was treated with barbarity and compelled to guard night and day a lonely temple in which the dead were deposited. After having been 12 years a prisoner among these savages, he was 12 years a slave. Do you hear this? After having been 12 years a prisoner among these savages, he was joyfully hastening to the camp of De Soto when the Castilian words, which he so imploringly uttered, arrested the terrible lance of Alvaro Nieto. Gratified at the appearance of Jean Ortez, who became his interpreter, De Soto gave him clothes and arms and placed upon him a good charger, meaning a horse, right? The Adelantado was now ready to penetrate the interior. His troops were provided with helmets, breastplates, shields, and coats of steel to rebel armors of the Indians, and with swords, Basquian lances, rude guns called arbias, crossbows, and one piece of artillery. So he got 1,000 men, and they got swords, Biscayan lances, which is wood lances with metal tips. He has rude guns, which is basically a zip gun, one shot shooters. But their thing is crossbows. If you don't know anything about the crossbows in the movies, it's like a it's like a machine gun, right? And they had one piece of artillery, which is the cannon. So he has 1,000 peoples, and they looking real. They have rude guns. His cavaliers, mounted upon 213 horses, were were the most gallant and graceful men of all Spain. Greyhounds of almost the fleetest of the winds were ready to be turned loose upon the retreating savages, and bloodhounds of prodigious and noted ferocity were at hand to devour them if the bloody Spaniards deemed it necessary. To secure the unhappy Indian, handcuffs, chains, and neck collars abounded in the camp. Workmen of every trade with their various tools, and men of science with the philosophical instruments and crucibles for refining gold were in attendance. Now, you only got 1,000 people. How many? I mean, how many philosophical instruments you got now? You know what I'm saying? Come on. You already said 200 of them is on horses. So that's come on, guys. Are we serious? Tons of iron and steel and much other metal, various merchandise and provisions to last 2 years were provided by the munificence of the commander and his followers. A long drove of hogs, which strangely multiplied upon the route, together with cattle and mules, was also attached to the expedition. The establishment of the Catholic religion appears to have been one of the objects for associated with this army. There were 12 priests, 88 clergymen of inferior rank, and 4 monks with their robes, holy relics, and sacramental bread and wine. So they walk around with the bread and wine. They got a bar. Most of them were relatives of the superior officers. Never was an expedition more complete, owing to the experience of De Soto, who, upon the plains of Peru, had ridden down hundreds in his powerful charges, and had poured out streams of savage blood with his broad and sweeping sword. It is not within our scope to detail the bloody engagements which attended the wanderings of this daring son of Spain upon the territory of the now state of Florida. How this is a book about Alabama, so they're not talking about Florida, but we're gonna keep it going. Everywhere, but especially in Mero defiles, the natives showered clouds of arrows upon the intruders. Strong in numbers and made vengeful by the cruelties inflicted by Narvaez, they had determined to fight De Soto until his army was destroyed or either driven from their soil. Nowhere in Florida did he find peace. Let's read that again. Nowhere in Florida did De Soto find peace. His gallant troops, however, were successful in getting out of there, right? The Indians, often put to flight and as often captured, were laden with chains, while the ponderous baggage of the expedition was unfeelingly thrown upon their backs for transportation. When in camp, they were made to pound corn and to perform the most laborious and servile drudgery. Now, again, you have to understand how they get so dramatic with these capturies and how they capture these people, and they let you know what they do because this is again part of their mind programming. We're just interested in the people and their cultures. Let's go. Cutting his way from Tampa Bay, DeSoto arrived at Anika, Appalachia, in the neighborhood of modern day Tallahassee. Then, as it is yet a fertile region, he drew from this town and from others which surrounded it breadstuff to last him during the winter. The sea, only 30 miles distant, was explored by a detachment, and at the present St. Mark's, the bones of horses, strewn timbers, and other evidences of Narvaez was discovered. During the winter, all the detachments in their various expeditions were attacked by the Indians, and the main camp at Appalachia was harassed day and night in the fiercest manner and with the most sanguinary results, meaning that it was a bad look. They were getting smashed. At length, Captain Melando, who had been ordered to sail to the west in some brigantines which arrived from Tampa Bay in search of a good harbor, returned in February and reported the discovery of the Bay of Ochus, since called Pensacola, which had a spacious channel and was protected from the winds on all sides. Delighted at this good news, which enabled the governor to make a wide circuit in the interior, he now ordered Melando to put to sea in the brigantines which they lay in the Appalachian Bay, and to sail for Cuba. He was commanded to sail from thence to Ochoas with a fleet of provisions, clothes, and military supplies, with which to recruit the expedition when it should have met him at the point in October. Learning from an Indian slave that a country to the northeast abounded in gold, De Soto broke up his winter encampment and set out in the direction. He entered the territory of present Georgia at its southwestern border and successfully crossing the Okamoga, Okanoe, and Ogeechee, finally rested upon the banks of the Savannah, immediately opposite the modern Silver Bluff. On the eastern side was the town of Cootafaki, where lived an Indian queen, young, beautiful, and unmarried, who ruled the country around to a vast extent. She glided across the river in a magnificent canoe with many attendants, and after an interesting interview with De Soto, in which they exchanged presents and passed many agreeable compliments, she invited him and his numerous followers over to her town. Listen to how they describing these folks. We gonna read this again. I'm trying to tell you, they not who y'all think they are. Where lived an Indian queen, young and beautiful and unmarried, and who ruled the country around to a vast extent. She glided across the river in a magnificent canoe with many attendants, and after an interesting interview with De Soto, in which they exchanged presents and passed many agreeable compliments, she invited him to and his numerous followers over to her town. Again, these are walled city people. They live in a walled city. She came out the city on a beautiful boat with her beautiful self. He gave her some gifts, you know. I got more gifts. Can I come in and do business with you? They exchanged compliments and pleasantries. This is how they enter into Georgia. Being kicked him out of and ran him out of Florida though, no doubt. But just don't believe everything you read on TV. I don't know. We might, but we got to keep reading so we can see if we can believe it. I don't know. The next day, the expedition crossed the savannah upon long rafts and in canoes, and quartered in the wigwams and under the spreading shades of the mulberry. Many interesting things occurred at this place, which are mentioned at length by both the journalists of De Soto, particularly Garcilaso, but which are here reluctantly omitted in our anxiety to reach the borders of Alabama. After a halt of several weeks at Cutifaki, De Soto broke his camp and, in company with the beautiful young queen, whom he retained about his person as a hostage, to secure obedience from her subjects, who did not escape from him until the army had nearly accomplished its route through northern Georgia. Now, again, we're going to read this again because they're trying to say that this lady accompanied him as a hostage, but he retained her, as a hostage, as a hostage. I know we don't understand the term of hostility and how and being a host and hosting someone and checking in. You know what I mean? But this nigga was checking in. He needed her because he knew that he couldn't move without her. You know what I'm saying? And if she didn't have a kind heart, man, if he didn't have gifts, you know what I'm saying? Man. So we don't want y'all to think that she was in chains. She wasn't in chains. She wasn't being held behind her will. She was looking out for the nigga. He checked in. Don't come around here if you ain't checking in, like she said. He looked out for her while she was in the whole territory. Savannah, okay, its route through northern Georgia marched up the Savannah to its headwaters and rested for a short time at a town in the present Habersham County, Georgia. From this place, the expedition assumed a direct western course across northern Georgia until they struck the headwaters of the Coosa River, where they advanced upon the town of Goulet. Now, I might be saying that wrong. It could be Gul. It could be Gulshi. It could be Kwashi. The way they spell it is Guax. Now, you know GUA is Guale, right? So it's Guxule. Is how they spell it. Like they spell it Guale, but they added an X in there, and it's supposed to be a place. We know what the X represents. The X represents X marks the spot. Don't worry about that. That's in my Mayan documentary that may never come out. But the town that they advanced upon was called Gauxule. Now, when you look that town up, you do research on that town, they try to say that town is in Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville, North Carolina. So we know it can be Asheville, North Carolina if they say the man went straight west. Asheville, North Carolina is north from Georgia, not straight west. So we're going to keep it going. Where they advanced upon a town of Guaxile. That's why it could be Asheville because it's when you see an X, the X is a sh sound. So it could be Guaxile, it could be Washille, could be Wash, a lot of things. But we're going to just say Washille, containing 300 houses and situated between several streams which had three sources in the surrounding mountains. So this town it's a small town, but it had 300 houses in the town. The chief met De Soto with 500 warriors clothed in light costume, after the fashion of the country, and conducted him to his own house, surrendered at the instance of his wife. So now again, this is a whole nother town with 300 houses and 500 soldiers. The chief comes outside. He welcomes him. His wife says, "No, no, no. You can sleep here. You can sleep with us." Okay. Surrendered at the instance of his wife, which stood upon a mound. So these people, these Guashi, these Guashul, are mound builders. The chief's house that De Soto stayed in was seated upon a mound and was surrounded by a terrace wide enough for 6 men to promenade abreast. So that means 6 men can walk side by side across the terrace in front of this guy's house on the mound. And this is Guaxile. We don't even know where this place is. We can't find this place. They put it in 3 different cities and 3 different states. But this town had 300 houses and mounds. You see? Having but little corn for the famished troops, the natives collected and gave them 300 dogs. Now, they had 300 dogs, which the Spaniards had been accustomed to eat in the pine barrens of lower Georgia, esteeming them as though they had been fat withers. Gaining much information about the country in conversation with the chief, conducted by the interpreter Jean Ortez, the governor, after the 4 days' sojourn at Guaxile, marched to the town of Conesaga in the modern county of Murray, Georgia. So you can't go to Asheville if you're back in Georgia that quick. I mean, it's impossible. Crossing the Conesuga Creek and journeying down its western banks, the Spaniards found it to increase in size, and being joined by other streams, it presently grew larger than the Guadalupe, which passed by Seville. This was the Ostenwala, and following its western side, De Soto, after a very slow march, advanced within 7 miles of Chiaba, Chiaja, Kia, where he was met by 15 Indians laden with corn, bearing a message from the chief, inviting him to hasten to his capital, where abundant supplies awaited. So now you got a chief inviting him and telling him to hurry up, run, don't walk, run over here. We got the goods. Come, come, come. Soon the eager Spaniards stood before the town of Chiaja, which is the site of modern Rome. So now we still in Georgia. You got Rome, Georgia, Athens, Georgia. We all know, we all know, and we're gonna tell you how these people dress. So if y'all want to know how Romans is dressed, they're gonna tell you how these people dress too. You can say who dressed alike. The most ancient Cherokee Indians now dodge the hijack. The most ancient Cherokee Indians, whose tradition has been handed down to us through old Indian traders, disagree to the precise place where De Soto crossed the ocean Twala to get over into the Chihaya. Some asserting that he passed over that river 7 miles above its junction with the Etowah, and that he marched from thence down to Kiowa, which all contend lay immediately at the confluence of the 2 rivers. Now, again, they already told you this is the first time they mentioned Cherokee, but they're not saying these people are Cherokees. They just telling you that the Cherokees supposedly know this history. But these people aren't Cherokees. These people build mounds and they live in mound cities with 300 houses. And these are some lower level cats over there. You know? While other ancient Indians asserted that he crossed with his army immediately opposite the town. But this is not very important. Coupling the Indian traditions with the account of Garcilaso, and that by the Portuguese eyewitness, we are inclined to believe that the later tradition that the expedition continued to advance down the western side of the Onstanlua until they halted in the view of the mouth of the Etowah. Etowah, baby. That's basically Atlanta, Cartersville. You see, you're going west. You're still in Georgia. You're almost at the border of Georgia. And what's the border of Georgia? Tennessee? Alabama? De Soto, having arrived immediately opposite the great town of Chiha, now set now the site of Rome, crossed the Ostenwala. I can't pronounce that. I keep getting that. Ost, Ost, Austin Ostenwala, in canoes and upon rafts made by logs prepared by the Indians. So the Indians had the rafts for him to get across the river. They're gonna bring this nigga across the river to kill him, to kidnap him, harass him, and all this. Come on. And took up his quarters in the town. The young The noble young chief received De Soto with unaffected joy and made him the following address. Mighty chief, says, nothing could have made me so happy as to be the means of serving you and your warriors. You sent me word from Washul to have corn collected to last your army 2 months. Here I have 20 barns full of the best which the country can afford. If I have not met your wishes, respect my tender age and receive my goodwill to do for you whatever I am able. So all of a sudden, you got some poor starving Indians and they got 20 barns full of corn. Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. The governor responded in a kind manner and was then conducted to the chief's own house, prepared for his accommodations. They showing off. These bros are showing off. Everywhere he go, he get to stay in a penthouse on the top floor. They think he got work. He a salesman. Come on, we got work for you. We got goods for you. That's why y'all don't understand. In the South, they got goods to sell. They got products. They ain't chasing no deer and no I mean and no animals, man. They got 20 barns of corn. Get with it. Not only do they got corn, but Kiha contain a great quantity of bear's oil and gourds and walnuts oil, as clear as butter and equally palatable. And for the only time upon the entire route, were seen pots of honey. The Spaniards irregularly quartered in the fields and scattered about at their will, reposed under trees and loitered upon the banks of the rivers. So these Spaniards, they just slept in the fields. They slept in the streets. They couldn't even, they was having so much fun. They was loitering upon the banks of the rivers. This ain't war. This ain't pillaging. This ain't conquest. These dudes could sleep in the fields and scatter about at their will. The horses, reduced in flesh and unfit for battle, grazed upon the meadows. Unaccustomed to allow such loose discipline, De Soto now winked at it, for the natives were friendly and every soul in the camp needed repose. These boys is beat to death, almost on their last leg. He said the horses couldn't even do it, couldn't even fight a fight, unfit for battle. And the Indians had to make them boats so they can even get over here to eat. One day, the chief presented the governor with a string of pearls, 2 yards in length. Y'all know 1 yard is 36 inches. 2 yards is 2 times 36 inches. As large, and they were as large as filberts, for which he received in return pieces of velvet and other cloth, which much esteemed by the Indians. He said that the temple of this town, where the remains of his ancestors were deposited, contained a vast quantity of these valuables. He invited his distinguished guests to take from it as many as he desired, but the latter declined, remarking that he wished to appropriate nothing to himself from such a sacred place. Who are these people? Come on, y'all. Who are these people? He said that the king invited his distinguished guests to rob the graves of his ancestors. Come on, man. I got some old dead people out here, man. They got more. Do you think this is a lot right here? What's this? 2 yards? This ain't nothing. My great granddaddy, he died with some gold, with a gold Rolex. Go get it. This nigga said, nah, I ain't even trying to disrespect you like that. Come on, y'all see, y'all don't, we gotta pay attention, y'all. We gotta pay attention. We gotta pay attention. The chief to gratify to gratify him in regard to the manner of obtaining these pearls, immediately dispatched some of his subjects in 4 canoes with instructions to fish all night for the oysters which contained them. It's easy for them to go get oysters. He just snapped his fingers. In the morning, he caused a fire to be made upon the bank. The canoes returned laden with oysters, heavy. And the natives, throwing the oysters upon the glowing coals, succeeded in finding many pearls the size of peas, which De Soto pronounced beautiful, but for the fire which had robbed them of some of their brilliancy. A soldier, in eating some of the pearls, or rather mussels, found one of great size uninjured and offered it to the commander for Donna Isabella. He declined the kindness intended his wife and urged the generous fellow to keep it to buy horses with at Savannah. Connoisseurs in camp valued it at 400 ducats. So he found a super large pearl by accident. You know what I mean? They was eating and he found a pearl. While here, a cavalier named Louis Bravo de Xerxes, walking one day upon the bank of the river, threw his lance at a dog, which suddenly disappeared under the bluff. Now these dogs, they not dogs, they they possums, but these dudes don't know no better, and they out here eating them possums like they good meals. You know what I mean? So we feeding them possums. Oh well, they like them, eat them. Coming up to recover his weapon, he found, to his horror, that it had pierced the temple of Jean Mateos and had killed him. The poor man was fishing on the margin of the stream, and little suspecting that death was at hand. That incident deep caused deep regret in the camp. The deceased, being much esteemed and having the only gray head in the army, was called by way of pleasantry Father Mateos. At this time, a principal Indian from Costa, a town below, informed De Soto that in the mountains to the north, at a place called Chisca, were mines of copper and of yellow metal, gold, still finer and softer. Having seen upon the savannah copper hatchets supposed to be mixed with gold, his attention was deeply aroused upon the subject. Villalobos and Severa, 2 fearless soldiers, volunteered to explore that region. Furnished with guides by the chief of Kiha, Indian scouts, they departed upon their perilous journey. The Spaniards had basked upon the delightful spot where there now stands the town of Rome for the space of 30 days. The horses had recruited, and the troops had grown vigorous and ready for desperate deeds. De Soto demanded of the hospitable chief, through the persuasion of some of his unprincipled officers, a number of females to accompany them in their wanderings. He said he demanded, but it wasn't no demand. He just asked. He got slick. He tried to ask. He didn't know who he was, so he asked, could he get some females, just to hang out with him. Watch what happened. That night, the inhabitants quietly left the town and hid themselves in the bordering forest. You got a town of 300 people, 300 houses, my nigga, 500 warriors, and they would just rather leave than to be rude to you. Because you asking for their queens, you asking for the goddesses. These niggas ain't got nothing to do. They ain't want to hear that. Sorry, you just wore out your welcome. So either you gonna leave or they gonna kill you. Or you gonna change your mind. Okay? So they was there being nice. As soon as you ask for mommy, sister, niecey, everybody got gone. Hmm. The chief entreated the governor not to hold him responsible for their conduct, for during his minority, an arbitrary uncle ruled them with a despotic will. With 60 troopers, De Soto ravaged the surrounding countries and provoked, and not finding the fugitives, laid waste their flourishing fields of corn. When afterwards informed that men only would that men only would be required to bear the baggage, the Indians returned to Kiha, apologized for their flight, and yielded to the last proposition. You want some dudes? Sure, you can take these niggas. Take them. Do whatever you want to do with them. Can't get these ladies, though. Never. Never. De Soto then broke up his camp, recrossed the Osten Twala, and marched down the west side of the Coosa, leaving the generous people of Chiha well satisfied with presents. So yeah, he was acting crazy. He tried to get something. He didn't know who he was, but when he left the people satisfied with presents. On the 2nd of July, and after 7 days' slow march, he entered the town of Costa. The Spaniards were now in Alabama, in the territory embraced in the county of Cherokee, and by the side of the Coosa. It's Cherokee County now, but it wasn't Cherokee County then. And by the side of the Coosa River, one of the noblest streams. Never before had our soil been trodden by European feet. Never before had our natives beheld white faces, long beards, strange apparel, glittering armor, and stranger than all, the singular animals bestrode by the dashing cavaliers. De Soto had discovered Alabama, not by sea, but after dangerous and difficult marches had penetrated her northeastern border with a splendid and well-equipped land expedition. The Atlantic states were quietly discovered by voyagers entering their harbors. Alabama was marched upon by an army, really, that had to beg us to get across the river, though. We gave them the boats, whatever. Alabama was marched upon by an army whose soldiers, sickened with famine upon the barrens of Georgia, and left tracks of blood upon the soil of Florida. Your blood, not our blood. Commanding his camp to be pitched 2 crossbow shots from the town, De Soto, with 8 men of his guard, approached the chief of Costa, who received him with apparent friendship. Again, mind you, if he was running around killing everybody and just going ballistic, people gonna hear about this. If they had guns and thunder sticks, you gonna hear a thunder stick. That's why he's saying he wanted to pitch his tent crossbow shots away, because the Indians don't have crossbows. Indians have bows, but he need a crossbow because he ain't got no guns. I'm talking about they got rude guns, and it ain't nothing that you gonna kill nobody with. You might damage them. You might you know what I mean? Like getting punched in your stomach. That's it. So they got crossbows. Commanding his camp to be pitched 2 crossbow shots from the town, De Soto, with 8 men of his guard, approached the chief of Costa, who received him with apparent friendship. While they were conversing together, some unscrupulous footmen entered the town and plundered several of the houses. The justly incensed Indians fell upon them with their clubs. Seeing himself surrounded by the natives and in great personal danger, the governor seized a cudgel and, with his usual presence of mind, commenced beating his own men. The savages, observing that he took their part, became pacified for a moment. So some people did something crazy. They thought they tried to pillage and plunder. The niggas was gonna kill him. He said, "Oh no, I got you. I do it. I got you. Don't worry. Don't even hurt your hands. I'll take care of it." So who is the savages? You know what I'm saying? If you getting hospitality like this, if you getting love like this, who's the savage? If you got barns of food, barns of corn stored, who's the savage? You got to pay attention, man. You can't call a person a savage, and everywhere you go, and you run into cities, you run into walled cities with organized governments, organized structures of community. economies. Who's the savage? These not hunter gatherers, my friend. These aren't people chasing deer. Nobody's talking about no deer. They talking about they got jars of bear grease, because we know what they doing with the bear grease. They getting that conch. They getting that. They getting that perm juice. That's that pimp juice. That bear grease. They got pots of honey. Who are the savages, y'all? Again, the book is called The History of Alabama, and incidentally of Georgia and Mississippi from the earliest periods. I want to know where the savage. Shit. I want to know who's scared of these niggas. Who wasn't finessing these niggas and using these niggas from the gate. Had them on the run. The Spaniards, let's keep going. In the meantime, taking the chief by hand, he led him with flattering words towards the camp, where he was presently surrounded by a guard and held as hostage. The Spaniards, because again, when they say they have a when they say hostage, they have an asterisk next to the word hostage, because it's not a hostage by the terms that we understand. All of this stuff that they're using are based upon terms at the time that now have adverse meanings, but at the time they didn't. You want to be a hostage. You want to be a host. You want to demonstrate hospitality. All of those things are good. Hosting, hospitality, helping, offering your service to a nigga that come with some shit. It's a hustle. These country niggas is hustlers. Don't believe it. Every up north nigga was a down south nigga first. The Spaniards remained under arms all night. That would mean they were under guard. They were under arms all night. So they had the Spaniards under guard with the guns on them, watching them. So how he they hostage if you, if they're if they got the guns on you? Let's keep going. The Spaniards remained under arms all night. 1,500 Indians, armed complete, often made dispositions to charge upon them. Voca, oh, that word is that vociferating, vociferating, like vocal furiating, angry, and insulting language. So he got 1,500 men, and the Soto only had 1,000 when he got off the boat. He only had 1,000 getting off the boat. He got 1,500 surrounding this folks, armed complete, making vociferating, angry, and assaulting language. Adverse to war since he had been so repeatedly attacked by the Floridians, De Soto restrained his anxious troops. His coolness, together with the influence of a prominent Indian who followed him from Kia, made it put an end to the serious affair. They saying he played it cool. Yeah, you outmanned, you outgunned, and you on and you surrounded. Yeah, he played it cool. He didn't have a choice. Of course, they're gonna tell it. They're gonna make it sound good. His coolness, together with the come on now, together with the influence of the Indian. That's what it was. 3 days after this, Villalobos and Silver returned from Chisca. They passed into the mountains and found no gold, but a country abounding with lofty hills and stupendous rocks. Dispirited, they returned to a poor town where the inhabitants gave them a buffalo robe, which they supposed once covered a tremendous animal, partaking of the qualities of the ox and the sheep. According to Garcilaso, the mines which they reached were of a highly colored copper and were doubtless situated in the territory of the county of DeKalb County. The sick who were placed. So that's Georgia, y'all. Just to be honest. So they saying that it's copper mines in DeKalb County. Okay, the sick who were placed in canoes at Kehi had by this time arrived downriver, furnished with burden carriers by the chief, who was to the last hour held a prisoner. The governor left Costa and on 9th of July, 1540, and crossed over to the east side of the Coosa upon rafts and canoes. Proceeding down its eastern bank, he encamped the first night at the town of Talley, Talle, like Talladega, Talluse, Tallahassee, Talley. The chief came forth to receive him, and in a formal speech begged him to command his service. Like, yo, use me, bro. What you got to sell? I heard you got work. You got some work. We got stuff. Welcome to Tyler. Welcome to Tally. It's a whole different vibe over here in Tally, Talladega, Tallahassee. I'm telling you, they got a whole different vibe. Rock with us. The chief came forth to receive him in a formal speech, begged him to command his services. Here the Spaniards remained 2 days, sharing the hospitality of the natives. Now we're going from hostage to hospitality. Upon their departure, they were supplied with 2 women and 4 men. Indeed, De Soto brought from the forest of Florida over 500 unhappy men and women, secured with chains, driven by keepers, and made to support the effects of the expedition. When any of them became sick, died, or escaped, it was his policy to supply their places at with the first town which he marched upon. He always, however, distributed among the principal Indians presents which were gratifying to them, and left at many of the towns pairs of swine to stock the country. So he always distribute to the principal Indians presents. That's his style. These dudes are salesmen. They trying to grease palms. The expedition now began to enter the far famed province of Coosa, Coosa, the beauty and fertility of which were known to all the Indians, even upon the seaside. Garcilaso asserts that is extended 300 miles. This one town they extended 300 miles. And other authors agree that it reached over the territory now embraced in the counties of Cherokee, Benton, Talladega, and Coosa. That's 4 counties that made up one city. Okay. Continuing through the rich lands of Benton, the expedition passed many towns subject to the chief of Coosa. Every day they met ambassadors, one going and another one coming, by which De Soto was assured of a hearty welcome at the capital. With joyful faces, the Indians rushed to his lines, every mile upon the route, furnishing supplies and assisting the troops from one town to another. The same generous reception attended him upon entering the soil of the county of Talladega. The hospitality of the Coosa surpassed that of any people whom he had yet discovered. The trail was lined with towns, villages, and hamlets, and many sown fields which reached from one to the other. With a delightful climate and abounding in fine meadows and beautiful little rivers, this region was charming to De Soto and his followers. The numerous barns were full of corn, while acres of that which was growing bent to the warm rays of the sun and rustled in the breeze. In the plains were plum trees, peculiar to the country, and others resembling those of Spain. Wild fruit clambered the tops of the loftiest trees, and lower branches were laden with delicious Isabella grapes. Fantastic, ain't it? This is the town. This is how y'all living. This is how y'all living, bro. This is how y'all living. So I want y'all to hear this. There's plum trees. There's wild fruit on the tops of trees. They got grapes hanging at the bottom of trees. This is how y'all living. On the 26th of July, 1540, the army came in sight of the town of Coosa. Far in the outskirts, De Soto was met by the chief, seated upon a cushion and riding in a chair supported on the shoulders of four of his chief men. 1,000 warriors, tall, active, sprightly, and admirably proportioned, with large plumes of various colors on their heads, followed him, marching in regular order. His dress consisted of a splendid mantle of marten skins thrown gracefully over his shoulder, while his head was adorned with a diadem of brilliant feathers. Around him, many Indians raised their voices in song, and others made music upon flutes. The steel clad warriors of Spain, with their glittering armor, scarcely equaled the magnificent display made by these natives of Alabama. The chief, receiving De Soto with the warmth of a generous heart, made him the following speech: Above all others of earth. I'm sorry, mighty chief, above all others of earth. Although I come now to receive you, yet I have received you many days ago, deep in my heart. If I had the whole world, it would not give me as much pleasure as I now enjoy at the presence of yourself and your incomparable warriors. My person, lands, and subjects are at your service. I will now march you to the quarters with playing and singing. So we got to go back, y'all. Now I gotta understand, this ain't real. This ain't real. When a person talk like this, he ain't real. He gaming. He finessing. Talk about, although I come down to receive you, I have already received you in my heart. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's like that. He trying to get this money. I mean, I know. I mean, you my brother. You know what I mean? Although this is my first time meeting you, brother, I already met you. We want to astro play type of shit. These niggas got good game. If I had the whole world, it would not even give me as much pleasure as I now enjoy. Just because you, what? I'm telling you, that sound crazy. But I'll tell you about the Laughing King and how these niggas talk. This ain't no this ain't no joke. That's how these niggas talk. They gonna butter you up. They gonna make you feel good. Oh, you look good, bro. I see you, man. You working out? Oh yeah. He said the whole. If I had the world, brother, it wouldn't do nothing because of the way you made. Oh my god. Like, where do you find these jokers? These jokers. That's just your uncle call. Look at this. You hear this joker? You know what we call it? We say he laying it on thick. That's what he did. He laid it on thick. This nigga said, if I had the whole world, it would not give me as much pleasure as I now enjoy. Excuse me. This is gonna kill me. At your presence, the presence of your at your presence. You know? De Soto responded in his best style, after which he advanced to the town, conversing with the chief, who rode in his sedan chair, while the lofty Spaniard sat upon his fiery steed. The royal house was set apart from the accommodations of the Adelanto, and one half of the other houses were surrendered. Yeah, he ain't give up his house. He said, nah, I'm gonna build you something. You take my son's spot. You can't have my spot. Even though he said I'll give up the world for you, that nigga ain't give up his crib. That's what I'm trying to tell y'all. These niggas be gaming. They be running game. Seeing these white boys, he couldn't help himself. Man, he was gonna give him all the game he got. But you can't stay in my house though. Can't sleep in my house though. Them other niggas ain't give him all that game, and they let him stay in the crib. Like, yo, nigga, mine is yours. For real, they ain't had to say it. They showed it. This nigga got good game. Good game. The town of Coosa was situated upon the east bank of the river of that name, between the mouths of the two creeks now known as Talladega and Tallahatchie, one of which is sometimes called Cuyahoga. It contained 500 houses and was the capital of this rich and extensive province. The town of Coosa contained 500 houses and was the capital of this rich and extensive province. The chief of Coosa was 26 years of age, well formed, intelligent, with a face beautifully expressive, and a heart honest and generous. He always dined with the Soto. One day he rose from the table and in an earnest manner besought the governor to select a region anywhere in his dominions and immediately establish upon it a large Spanish colony. De Soto had contemplated peopling some beautiful country and was better pleased with this section than any other, but his imagination still pointed him to some gold region like Peru. He returned the chief He returned the chief his profound thanks, adduced many reasons for his declining the liberal offer, among others, that Malando's ships would be waiting for him at the Bay of Pensacola. So understand that right there. That the chief, the black brother, they ain't say he black. We gonna do that because you notice they haven't described the colors of these Indians, the hair of these Indians, the complexion. You know what I mean? They're not talking about these Indians' description. They haven't described these Indians yet. We're gonna get them though. They don't get. We're gonna get them. They're gonna slip up. But he offered them here. Take any place in my country and make yourself a village, make yourself a town, make yourself a large Spanish colony. He said, nah, I'm cool. Cause he looking for gold. But yeah, the niggas like, hey man, y'all gonna set up shop here? You want to set up shop here? If I had the world, I would rather give it up just to be with you. Don't ever leave me, ass niggas. Baby ass niggas. Stay here forever, ass niggas. That's what they want over there in Coosa. You know, good game going around here in Coosa. Yet, in the face of all this kindness, the the politic and suspicious De Soto kept the chief about his person as a hostage. Again, they're using this word. That's how y'all know it's fake. You can't tell me you surrounded by 1,500 people. The nigga giving you land, you don't want it, giving you everything you don't want it, but you still gonna say he's the hostage. That's just saying, like in his mind, that you know what I mean. He's scared to death. That's all. He's scared to death, y'all. De Soto kept the chief about his person as a hostage, not as his hostage. You know what I mean? But as he's playing a mind game to preserve peace among the Indians and to exhort slaves and provisions, right? To beg for slaves and provisions. Enraged at the imprisonment of their chief, the Indians fled the woods to prepare for war. Four captains with three companies were dispatched in different directions in pursuit and returned with many women and men in chains. Some of the principals of these were released at an entreaty of the chief, while others were carried off with the expedition, laden with irons and baggage. And those who were not destroyed at the battle of Maubila, what the hell? How do we get here already? Were conducted far beyond the. How do we get here? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay, well, let's keep going. The Indians returned from the forest and remained at peace with the Spaniards, but were still dissatisfied at the restrictions imposed upon the liberties of their chief. After 25 days had passed at the capital of Coosa, De Soto marched in the direction of Tallapoosa, leaving behind a Christian Negro, too sick to travel, whom the Indians desired to retain among them on account of his singular hair and sable complexion. So this is now why we gonna keep going. He recovered, and he was doubtless the descendant, the distant ancestor of the dark-colored savages seen in that region in the modern in more modern terms. This is a hijack here. Just to do to say, it's one person. The first time they described somebody as a Negro, right? They didn't say he was an African. They just said he was a Christian Negro. But they said he had singular hair. What's that mean? That's like Indian hair and sable complexion. That's not dark complexion. Sable is like a lighter complexion. You see? So what are they saying? But he is the ancestor of the dark colored savages. One person in one town of 1,500 warriors. He created a whole. This is how they throw history in a loop. They never said he was African anyway. They just said he was a Christian Negro. See how that works? But then the other guy, he looked just like him, and they didn't know he was Indian until he said, "I'm a Christian." Was he a Negro too? The first day the army passed through the large town of Talamuchasa within a few hours after it had been abandoned by its inhabitants. The next day the town of Utwa was reached, where De Soto encamped 6 days, awaiting the abatement of the stream which ran by it, now violently swallowed by its incessant rains. As the expedition had not crossed any stream since leaving Coosa, it is probable that one alluded to was the modern day Tallahatchie. The march was continued to Ubaluha, situated between Hatchet Creek, which was called a small river. The town was surrounded by a wall composed of 2 rows of posts driven deep in the ground with poles laid horizontally between them. The inner and outside of the framework neatly stuccoed with clay and straw. Portholes were left at the proper distances, forming a defense as high as a lance. Such was the character of Indian fortifications from this place onward. So they saying from this space on, everybody got a wall that comes from the ground. Okay. But they already said everybody else had a wall too, but okay. In consequence, the duress of the chief of Coosa, whom De Soto carried along with him, but treated with respect and kindness, the Indians of Ulabahawi were in arms. Before the Spaniards, and again, remember these names, Indians of Ulabali, Ulabaha, Ullebahale, Ullebahel. All right, E. All right. Before the Spaniards entered the suburbs, 12 principal men, armed with bows and with lofty plumes upon their heads, advanced and volunteered to rescue their beloved chief by arraying a formidable force. But he dissuaded them from it. On the opposite side of the creek lived a sub chief who furnished De Soto with 30 women for slaves and to carry burdens. Then the Alentado pursued his wanderings, leaving behind Mansano, a native of Salamanca, a noble parentage who was lost while rambling in the hills for grapes, which were left in great abundance. The route lay along the modern Socopatoy region in the county of Coosa. The expedition passed the town of Tallase and several others, subject to the chief of Tallase, and arrived at the great town of that name on the 18th of September, 1540. Tallase was an extensive town, the principal part of which was encompassed by a wall, similar to that just described, with the addition of a terrace. It reposed upon a point of land almost surrounded by a main river, which was the Tallapoosa. Extensive fields of corn reached up and down the banks. On the opposite side were other towns, skirted with rich fields, laden with heavy ears of corn. The beautiful river rolling in its silvery waters through the fertile lands and the delightful climate contributed to render the whole prospect most pleasing. But the reception of De Soto among these people was cool and scarcely civil. Some had abandoned their houses at his approach and gone into the woods. However, the chief gave him 40 Indians. After a few days, a noble looking young. Now, again, this town has a wall, so why would you leave a walled town and go into the woods? So, again, you got to understand it's a lot of going on here. But just respect the fact of the civilization, the town, the walls, the communication. It's so much gems in here, and we about to get into the real gem. Because again, they cannot. Anyway, after a few days, a noble-looking young savage of gigantic proportions and with a face extremely handsome and interesting visited the marquis. He was the son of Tuscaloosa, a potent chief whose domains commenced 30 miles below and extended to the distant Tom Big Boy. He bore an invitation from his father to De Soto to hasten to his capital. So again, imagine how many people are inviting killers and thieves and kidnappers. If he really taking all these kings hostages, why is the next nigga like, yo, hurry up, get here, leave them, leave the people you just kidnapped and come here? Where do they do that at? You don't send your son chase a nigga unless you got a plan. Now, some of these niggas got plans. I'm trying to tell you, it gets thick. It gets thick. But I'm just want y'all to understand that it can't be as bad as it is if everybody chasing these niggas. They inviting this nigga to come do business. Come bring your gifts here. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, okay, cool. He stole one dude, he stole another dude, but nobody told nobody that he stole him. Because if you tell somebody he stole you, the next nigga might not get stolen. But revenge is mine, says the Indians. Having remained at Tallase 20 days, De Soto dismissed the chief of Coosa, with whom he parted upon good terms. How do you depart upon good terms if you had this nigga hostage? Like they tried to explain. He crossed the Tallapoosa in canoes and upon rafts, marched down the eastern side, and encamped the first night at Casista, probably the site of modern Atus. Delayed in passing the river, he could not have advanced further that night. Now, wait a minute. Let's just go back right quick. Because again, now you could say, well, maybe when he caught the chief was the enemy of the other chief. So he like, yo, he stole my friend. Cool. But why did he say, yo, you got him, bring him with you? I want to trade that dude or something. You know what I'm saying? How do you leave on good terms? How do you always leave all these places on good terms? And by giving gifts. And the thing about these people is that he needs translators. Every time he goes somewhere, the language changes, and the only people that know the language that you going to speak is the people that you just left. The further west you go, the further the language changes. Every village you need a new interpreter. Watch, they're gonna break it down. The next day, advancing within 6 miles of the temporary residence of Tuscaloosa, a halt was made in the woods. Louis de Moscoso, the campmaster with 15 horsemen, was dispatched to inform the chief of the proximity of the governor. Moscoso found the proud Mobilian seated with two cushions, placed on a large and elegant matting upon an eminence which commanded a delightful prospect. His numerous attendants posted themselves around him, leaving space for the nearer position of his chief men. One of these held over his head a round deerskin shield with a staff in the middle resembling an umbrella. Painted with stripes of different colors, it was used as a banner in his wars, but was employed at present in protecting his head from the rays of the sun. Tuscaloosa was 40 years of age, of great stature, with immense limbs. He was spare around the waist, and his whole form was admirably proportioned. His countenance was handsome, but grave and severe. He was the lord of many territories and much people, and was feared by his neighbors and subjects. In vain did Moscoso endeavor to excite his curiosity by prancing his horses before him. Sometimes he scarcely deigned to raise his eyes, and then again he bestowed upon the troops the most contemptuous smiles. Even when De Soto arrived, he preserved the same haughty demeanor, but in consideration of his position as commander in chief, he reluctantly advanced and made the following address. I bid you welcome. I greet you as I would my brother. It is needless to talk long. What I have to say can be said in a few words. You shall know how willing I am to serve you. I am thankful for your things which you have sent me, chiefly because they were yours. I am now ready to comply with your desires. You get that? Period. You see what I'm saying? He ain't got a lot of rap. He ain't got a lot of talk. You know what I'm saying? He says, all right, cool. I appreciate the stuff you sent me. You seem like you're trying to do some business. You sent me the upfront cash. Now, what you want? The governor replied in true Spanish style, failing not to assure the chief that even in distant Indian countries through which he passed, he had heard of his greatness and power. Now he got to come with the buttering up. He got to come with the compliment. See that? This interesting scene occurred below the Lion Creek in the present county of Montgomery. Both journalists agreed that De Soto had advanced 36 miles below Tallase, reposing at this town the space of 2 days. Preparations were made to advance. An officer was sent among the horses to find one large enough to sustain the giant Indian. A large pack horse, the property of the governor, was selected. Apparelled in a rich suit of scarlet and a cap of the same, given to him by De Soto, the chieftain, who was a head taller than any of his attendants, mounted upon his horse, with his feet nearly trailing on the ground. Onward the lofty and graceful Mobilian rode, side by side with the governor, marching through the territory embraced in the present counties of Montgomery, Lowndes, and eastern part of Dallas. The expedition arrived at a town called Paiche, seated on the peninsula formed by the windings of a large river, the same which runs by Tallase, but here grown much wilder and deeper. This was the Alabama. On the march hither, a distressing disease broke out among the Spaniards from want of salt. The death of several, together with the loathsome condition of the sufferers, spread alarm in the camp. Those who afterwards used ashes with their food from a weed recommended by the Indians escaped the dreadful malady. The town of Paiche was strongly fortified. Its name is probably preserved in a large creek which flows into the Alabama on the northern side of Ch- Chilachi. Kalaki, right? Yeah, on the side of Kalaki, right? Kakalaki. Here we go. The Indians, having no canoes, soon constructed rafts of dry logs and cane, upon which the troops were wafted to the northern or western side of the Alabama, according to the conviction of the writer, in the upper part of the country of Wilcox. The expedition assumed a southern direction and marched down the western side of the Alabama, over the soil of the present county of Wilcox. De Soto began to read the Mobilian chief. He was still proud and distant, and evidently felt that he was a prisoner. Upon the whole route, he had been studiously engaged in consulting with his principal men, and constantly sending runners to the capital with messages. De Soto suspected that he meditated schemes which aimed at the destruction of the Spaniards. His suspicions were further awakened when Villabos and another cavalier were believed to have been killed by his subjects. When asked about them, Tuscaloosa indignantly replied, "I am not their keeper." High words ensued between him and De Soto, but the latter restrained himself until an opportunity offered of taking deep revenge on the chief for his insolence in the death of the two Spaniards. So they thought that Tuscaloosa had killed some of his folks. Tuscaloosa said, "Hey, I ain't their keeper. I'm not here. I'm not here to play with you," is what Tuscaloosa said. Boy, boy, boy. Y'all want to know why they got problems in Mobile, Alabama? Y'all want to know if Mobile, Alabama is an Indian town? Listen up. Pay attention. Follow. Hit the like. Hit the subscribe. We about to get Mobile, Alabama with some Mobile Indians. Here we go. Y'all never heard of no Mobile Indians. Y'all ain't know Mobile was the Indian word. Let's go. Let's go. On the third day of the march from Paichi, they passed through many populous towns, well stored with corn, beans, pumpkins, and other provisions. In the meantime, Caramella and Vasquez, two able and discreet cavaliers, were dispatched in advance to discover if any conspiracy was going on at the capital. Before daylight, on the fourth morning, De Soto placed himself at the head of 100 horses and an equal number of foot, and they marched rapidly in that direction with the chief, leaving Muscos, the campmaster, to bring up the large portion of the troops. At 8 o'clock the same morning, the 18th of October, 1540, De Soto and Tuscaloosa arrived at the capital called Maubila, spelled Maubila. 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 Not Mobile. Maubila. It's an American Indian word. Let's get going. Get you some popcorn. Get you some stains. We in Mobile. It's about to get thick. Instead, it stood by the side of a large river upon a beautiful plain. It consisted of 80 handsome houses, each cons- each conspicuous enough to contain 1,000 men. I apologize. I must have been reading that wrong. I must have made a mistake. It stood in the city in the side of a large river upon a beautiful plain. It consisted of 80 handsome houses, each spacious enough to contain 1,000 men. 80 houses with 1,000 men. That's 80,000 people. But how do you build a house that can contain 1,000 people and then build 80 of them? This is a game. This is a game over here. I don't even know nobody that could build one house that could contain 1,000 people, yet alone 80 of these niggas, and they still handsome. Hmm. They all fronted a large public square. They were all encompassed by a high wall, made of immense trunks of trees set deep in the ground and close together, strengthened with cross timbers and interwoven with large vines. A thick mud plaster, resembling handsome masonry, concealed the woodwork, while portholes were abundant, together with towers capable of containing 8 men each at the distance of 50 paces apart. An eastern and western gate opened into the town. The writer is satisfied that Mobila was upon the north bank of the Alabama and at a place now called Choctaw Bluff in the county of Clark. At about 25 miles above the confluence of the Alabama and Tombigbee, they marched from Piachu. The time occupied the distance from Maubila to the Bay of Pensacola, computed by Garcilaso and the Portuguese gentleman, at 80 miles. And the representation of aged Indians and Indian countrymen that here was fought what? That here was fought the great battle between the Soto and the brave Mobilians had forcibly contributed to make the impression upon his mind. Okay. That's what he wrote. See, now they get nervous now. They don't even want to talk now. They can't even write no more because they about to talk about their destruction. They about to talk about the Mobilians. Del Soto and Tuscaloosa were ushered into the great public square of Mobile with songs, music upon Indian flutes, and the graceful dancing of beautiful brown girls. End quote. First time they mention a complexion, but hey, now they in Mobile, they about to get their ass killed. Now they saying that the girls is black. What else? The girls is brown. What else they gonna say? Is this the end? They alighted from their characters and seated themselves under a canopy of state. Remaining here a short time, the chief requested that he should no longer be held as a hostage, nor required to follow the army any further. The Alentando hesitated in reply, which brought Tuscaloosa immediately to his feet, who walked off with the lofty and independent bearing and entered one of the houses. De Soto had scarcely removed from his surprise when Jean Ortez followed the chief and announced that breakfast awaited him at the governor's table. Tuscaloosa refused to return and added, "If your chief knows what is best for him, he will immediately take his troops out of my territory." In the meantime, Caramella, one of the spies, informed the governor that he had discovered over 10,000 men in the houses. What? The subjects of Tuscaloosa and other neighboring chiefs that their houses were filled with bows, arrows, stones, and clubs. The old women and children had been sent out of town, and the Indians were at the moment debating the most suitable hour to capture the Spaniards. The general received this startling intelligence with deep solitude. He secretly sent word to his men to be ready for an attack. Then, anxious to avert a rupture by regaining possession of the person of the chief, he approached him with smiles and kind words. But Tuscaloosa scornfully turned his back upon him, and he was lost among the host of excited warriors. At that moment, a principal Indian rushed out of the same house and loudly denounced the Spaniards as robbers, thieves, and assassins, who should no longer impose their great chief by depriving him of a liberty with which he was born and his fathers before him. His insolence and the motions which he made to shoot at the squad of Indians by drawing a bow and arrow so incensed Balazar de Galgos that, with a powerful sweep of his sword, he split down his body and let out his bowels. Like bees in a swarm, the savages now poured out upon the Spaniards. De Soto placed himself at the head of his men and fought face to face with the enemy, retreating slowly, passing the gate into the plains. His cavalry had rushed to rescue their horses, tied outside the walls, some of which the Indians came upon in time to kill. Still receding to get out of the reach of the enemy, De Soto at length paused at a considerable distance upon the plain. The Mobilians seized the Indian slaves, packed upon their backs the effects of the expeditions which had now arrived and lay scattered about, drove the poor devils within the walls, knocked off their irons, placed bows and arrows in their hands, and arrayed them in the battle against their former slave masters. In the first sally, De Soto had 5 men killed and many wounded, himself among the latter number. Having captured the baggage, the victors covered the grounds in advance of the gate and rent the air with exulting shouts. At that moment, the governor headed his cavalry and followed his footmen, charged upon the savage mass, and with the terrible slaughter drove them back into the town. The Indians rushed to the portholes and towers and shot upon the invaders clouds of arrows, compelling them to gain, uh, compelling them again to retire from the walls. A small party of Spaniards were left in a perilous situation. 3 crossbow men and an armed friendly Indian, 5 of De Soto's guards, some servants, and 2 priests, not having time to join the others when first attacked in the square, took refuge in the house set apart for their commander. The savages showed an entrance to the door, but the unhappy inmates bravely defended it, killing the assailants as they tried to enter. Others clambered upon the roof to open the covering, but were but were as successful but were successfully repulsed. Separated from their friends by a thick wall and in the midst of thousands of enemies painting to lap their blood, their destruction appeared inevitable. During the long struggle for existence, the Holy Fathers engaged in earnest prayers for the deliverance. Lord God, save my booty, while the others fought with a desperation which rose with the occasion. Seeing the Spaniards again retreat, the Indians rushed through the gates, dropping down from the walls, and engaged fiercely with the soldiers, seizing their sweeping swords and piercing lances. 3 long hours were consumed in the terrible conflict, first one side giving way, and then the other. Occasionally, De Soto was strengthened by small squads of horsemen who arrived and, without orders, charged the midst of the bloody melee. The governor was everywhere present in the fight, and his vigorous arm hewed down the lustiest warriors. That sword, which had often been dyed in blood of Peruvians, was now crimson with the gore of a still braver race. The invincible Baltazar de Galgos, who struck the first blow, followed it up, and was only equaled by the commander in the profuse outpouring of savage blood. Far on the borders of the exciting scene rode his brother, Friar Juan, a Dominican friar who constantly beckoned him to quit the engagement on foot and take this horse, which he bestrode in order to fight better. But Balthazar, gloating on blood, heeded him not, when presently an arrow, which made a slight wound upon his back, caused him to retire to a less dangerous distance. Indeed, the whole battle, the priests kept the plain, watched the awful carnage with intense anxiety, and often fell upon their knees, imploring Almighty God, give us victory. Give victory, Lord, to the Spaniards. At length, the matchless daring of De Soto and his troops forced the Indians to take a permanent position within Mobilia, closing after them its ponderous gates. The sun began to lower towards the tops of the loftiest trees when Moscoscos and the last of the army arrived. He had strangely lorded, by the way, allowing the soldiers to scatter in the woods and hunt their leisure. His advance guard heard at a distance the alarm of drums and the clangor of trumpets. With beating hearts, they passed back the word along the scattered lines from one to the other, and soon the hitmost rushed to the support of their exhausted and crimson stained comrades. Joined by all forces, De Soto formed the best armed into 4 divisions. Provided with bucklers for defense, battle axes to demolish the walls, they made a simultaneous charge at the firing of an arquebus. Upon the first onset, They were assailed with showers of arrows and dreadful missiles. Repeated blows against the gates forced them open. The avenues were filled with eager soldiers rushing into the square. Others, impatient to get in, battered the stucco from the walls and aided each other to climb over the skeleton works. A horrible and unparalleled carnage ensued. The horsemen remained on the outside to overtake those who might attempt to escape. The Indians fought in the streets, in the square, from the tops of the houses and the walls. The ground was covered with dead, but not one of the living entered the quarters. The Spaniards were protected with bucklers and coats of mail, while the poor Indians only covered with thin shield which the Great Spirit gave them at the dawn of their existence. The troops entered the town in time to save the two priests and their companions who had so long held out against such fearful odds. The battle, which now waxed hotter and more sanguinary than ever, cannot be as graphically described as the heroic deeds on either side so justly deserve. Often the Indians drove the troops out of the town, and as often they returned with increased desperation. Near the wall lay a large pool of delicious water, fed by many springs. It was now discolored with blood. Here soldiers fell down to slack the intense thirst created by heat and wounds, and those who were able to rouse again once more pitched into combat characterized by the most revolting destruction of human life. For some time, young females had joined in the fight, and they now contended side by side by the foremost warriors, sharing in the indiscriminate slaughter. Heated with excitement, smarting with his wounds, and provoked at the unsubdued fierceness of the natives, the Soto rushed out alone by the gate, threw himself into the saddle, and charged into the town, calling with a loud voice, Our Lady, Our Lady of San Domingo. He forced in charge over hundreds of fighting men and women, followed by the brave Nuno Tubar. While opening lanes through the savage ranks and sprinkling his tracks with blood, he rose on one occasion to cast his lance into a gigantic warrior. At that instant, a powerful winged arrow went deep into the bottom of his thigh. Unable to extract it or to sit in the saddle, he continued to fight to the end of the battle, standing on his stirrups. Everywhere that mighty son of Spain now gored upon Alabama blood. His fearless bounds filled the boldest soldiers with renewed courage. At length, the houses were set on fire, and the wind blew the smoke and flames in all directions, adding horror to the scene. The flames ascended in mighty volumes. The sun went down, hiding himself from the awful sight. Maubila was in ruins, and her inhabitants destroyed. Do y'all believe that? It's just crazy, boy. It's just crazy. I don't believe that. The battle of Maubila had lasted 9 hours. It was disastrous to De Soto. 82 Spaniards were slain or dead in a few days after the engagement. Among these were Diego de Soto, the nephew of the governor, Don Carlos Enriquez, who had married his niece, and Manriquez, a cavalier of Portugal, who had served with distinction in Africa. Africa. Man, all the camp equipage and baggage were consumed in the house where the Indians had stored it, except that of Captain Andres de Vasconcelos, which arrived late in the evening. All the clothes, medicine, instruments, books, much of the armor, all the pearls, the relics, robes of the priests, their flour and wine used in the holy sacrament, with 1,000 other things which a wilderness could not supply, perished in the flames. The Mobilians were nearly all destroyed. Oh man, it's about to get good. It's about to get even better though. It's just one battle. Don't worry. Assuming at a point between the two estimates, um, it's safe to say that at least 6,000 were killed in the town and upon the plains, or were afterwards found dead in the woods. The authors also disagree as to the fate of Tuscaloosa, the one contending that he was consumed in the flames, and the other that he decamped upon the arrival of Moscoso at the solicitation of his people, attended by a small guard and laden with rich spoils. It is more probable that the black warrior remained in his capital, desiring not to survive the downfall of his people. See, here we go now. They just giving you everything now. It is more probable that the black warrior remained in his capital, desiring not to survive the downfall of his people. So we got brown people in Coosa, and we got black warriors in Mobile. And y'all don't even know about these people. Tuscaloosa, Maubila. It's like we just think these places is cities. We just think these places is names on a map, but these are people. These are real Indians, not this five tribe bullshit. Come on, man. Beautiful people. I just wanted to share that. It's been on my mind lately. Like I've been hearing the voices of these people upon the ruins of Mobilia. The Spanish passed the first night in confusion and pain, sending forth groans and cries that fell upon the distant air like the ravens of the damned. You know what I mean? Like these niggas, how did they win? In every direction, a sickening, revolting sight was presented. In the slowly receding fire, piles of brave Mobilians cracked and frowned upon the glowing coals. All the Spaniards were wounded, except the Holy Fathers, and were besides exhausted, famished, and intoxicated with the most fiendish desperation. 1,700 dangerous wounds demanded immediate attention. It was often that a soldier had a dozen severe ones with a barbed arrows rankling in his flesh. So yeah, man, that was a good one right there. I hope y'all enjoyed that one. Story of Mobile, the Battle of Mobile. I never heard of that one, huh? Like you hear of Tuscaloosa, but you don't know that Tuscaloosa has something to do with Mobile. We don't know that Tallahassee and Talladega, Tallahatchie got something to do with each other. The most beautiful people in the world, the Coosa, the Alabama, the Guaxile. So salute to the gods, salute to the goddesses. Hope y'all get to enjoy your history. No thought we was doing good until Queens got retained. They ate the puppies. They was eating possums. They ain't eat no puppies. These people don't know. They don't know about that. Shout out to Birmingham. Exactly. Shout out to Birmingham. Hidden in America. Yes, guys, I hope this helps. This was such a I'm so glad I got to share this. Maybe I'll get to sleep tonight. But I think we needed to hear um, some names, some splendor, and some grandeur, so we can connect back with our true selves. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace to the gods, peace to the goddesses.